Present. Michael Richmond. Robert Jr.
Present.
Matthew Paul.
Yeah, we have 4. We can do the presentation. We have 3 on the way, so we'll have a quorum by the time we get to item 3 or item 2. Item 3, workshop session, Office of Talent Management report. Dr. Narvez.
Yes, thank you. We are excited to share this interactive presentation with you tonight featuring the Office of Talent Management. We listened to your feedback about what you hope for in a presentation, and as I mentioned, teeing it out, we have made it interactive, so be ready to participate throughout the presentation today. And we also are pleased to feature one of our principals and one of our executive coaches for principals to illustrate some of the great leadership development work that goes on in the organization as well. And so with that, we're looking forward to hearing your feedback and your comments and your thoughts in this presentation today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Chief of Talent Management, Jennifer Allen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be able to tell our story. And tonight is about stories. So I'd like to start off by explaining that. I'm going to cover 3 points. We as a team are going to cover 3 key points in this presentation. First, to engage you in a dialogue, because we know that you'd like to have that opportunity, regarding what you see as the challenges Hartford faces as we work together to assure that each of our schools is led by an effective and supported principal, and each of our classrooms it has an effective and supported teacher so that all of our children have the most effective possible experience. Secondly, I'd like to share with you some of the key initiatives within the Office of Talent Management designed to recruit, induct, grow, and retain effective teachers and leaders. In short, to support our educators throughout various stages in their careers. So we'll talk a little bit about our initiatives. And thirdly, I'd like to outline for you our strategic goals for 2014-2015 to compare our goals with what your hopes for the future of the Hartford Public Schools may be. So 3 points. For those of you who were in attendance at convocation, you'll recall that Dr. Narvez emphasized the importance of story, and she shared her own story coming to Hartford, as did Mayor Segarra and Chairman Waring, who stayed within the 2 minutes allotted. And he was very proud of that.
Nicely done.
As Dr. Narvez pointed out, each of us has 3 different stories to tell. The first story is the story of self, the personal story that brought each of us in our different ways to Hartford. My story, your story, the story of each person who works in the Hartford Public Schools and how he or she came to be here. The second story is the story of us, the collective story of those of us within the Hartford Public Schools as we work together on behalf of the children and the families of Hartford. And then finally, it's the story of now. What action our work requires all of us right here, right now, in this place to do. And that's what I'd like to end with in this evening's presentation. But to underscore the view of the Office of Talent Management, the longer look at multiple stages in the lives of educators, I'd like to introduce you to 2 leaders within our district, Leonardo Watson and Thomas Fanuel, Leo and Tom. And I've asked them to tell you their stories of self, how each of them came to Hartford, left Hartford, and returned to Hartford, and then to explain how their stories developed into their story of us. So we'll start with Leo.
Good evening. I first want to just thank Jennifer for this opportunity to speak to the board about my story. I first came to Hartford, Connecticut in March of 1990, and I lived on Charlotte Street, which is in the north end of Hartford, Connecticut. The first school I went to was this school. It was at that time called Fox Middle School, and I see a few people I worked with while I was at Fox Middle School as a student, but also as a teacher when I returned. Right after Fox Middle School, I ended up going to Weaver, graduated with a full scholarship to Providence College, started engineering, but found out it wasn't didn't give me any enthusiasm. It didn't give me the joy that I really look for. And, quickly switched to education. And I knew from my first education class, I entered the right field. I say this because when I left Weaver High School and went to Providence College, it was one of the first times that I actually left Hartford, Connecticut. And it was a great experience because I always found myself, anytime I returned from college, no matter where my mother was living, I always found myself going back to Charlotte Street, Waverly Street, the park that I always knew. It was home to me. Right after I finished up Providence College, and I worked in Rhode Island for 3 years, started a family, and we had to make a decision about where do we want to live. And it was an easy choice. We came back home. We came back to Connecticut. I had choices of where I wanted to work, and I chose to work at Fox Middle School, the school I graduated from that gave me my first preview of education in America. And it was a wonderful experience. I finished up my master's degree in administration, worked with a wonderful principal, Andrew Thoreau, who gave me opportunities to really build my professional growth. And with that, I actually said, you know what? I love the classroom, but how can I assist more students? And I started focusing on administration. Completed an administration degree, and was just waiting around for the right opportunity. I did a Dean of Students role at the Media and Journalism Academy when it first opened at Weaver High School for a year, and then soon after, returned to the classroom. And after 2 years of figuring out, do I really want to go into administration or not, a wonderful opportunity came, and it was through the Hartford Board of Education, and it was the Aspiring Leadership Cohort. And it was an initiative that recruited classroom teachers, curriculum coaches, people who really wanted to take a leadership role in the future in education. And I was a part of this team, and it was during this time period that I said, I know administration is the place where I need to be. Without even thinking about it, an opportunity came up for the residence principal program, which was an affiliation with Hartford Public Schools, New Haven, Bridgeport, and Achievement First through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I was enthused when I had the opportunity to be a part of the program, and I tell you, I've worked with Jennifer, I worked with members of the central office, my cohort team members, the directors, and have really prepared me for where I am right now and what I'm doing, which is the principal of Simpson Waverly School. And that's the last thing. The other day I was walking through, and it was Friday, and I was in the 8th grade class, and a student said to me, he looked at me and I said, what's wrong? Well, what's your question? And he said, he shook his head, and I said, no, ask it. And he said to me, he said, are you going to leave? And it really made me take a step back, but I said to him, like convincingly, no. I'm not going anywhere. I'm committed. I'm here to stay. I'm here for a difference. I'm here to support you all. And when I look at it all, I want to continue supporting our students, not only at Simpson Waverly, but throughout the Hartford district. And I found out probably a month ago that I was going to work with Thomas Fanuel. Had no idea who Thomas Fanuel was. I know he was the district leader. And I'm going to pass the torch on at this time. But that's my story of why I'm in Hartford and still in Hartford.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hartford Public Schools was introduced in my life at the age of 6 years old when I began the first grade at the Richard J. Kinsella Elementary School, which is now Betances. I lived in the projects of Dutch Point on the south end for 17 years. Finished 8th grade at Kinsella and attended Hartford Public Schools. First 2 years were at the historic building Broad Street and Hopkins Street, which is now Interstate 84. And my last 2 years was at the site of Forest Street. And my class was the second class to graduate out of that new building, class of 1965. Ooh, I just told. Shared something. I left Hartford and went to the historical black college, Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina, and graduated in 1969 with a degree in elementary education. Interestingly, I was the only male in that program. I enjoyed it. Returned to Hartford and was offered a job at the Fred D. Wish Elementary School on Barber Street. Now, I taught there from 1969 to 1982, served under the leadership of several principals, Mr. Alvin B. Wood and Freddie Murphy. Began my administrative career upon an invitation from then Paul Copes, who was principal of Weaver High School, to become vice principal at the historic Weaver High School in 1982. And I'm going to say in April of 1982, and I was there until June of 1982. And the reason for that was because I was the last one hired at that time, and the Office of Civil Rights cited the Hartford Public Schools for its hiring practices, and Weaver High School administrative staff was all male, all African Americans. And unfortunately, since I was the last one brought on, I had to go. And I had an opportunity to link on to Meriden Public Schools, and I served Platt High School as their vice principal for 10 years, from 1982 to 1992, and 1992 to 2004, I served as principal of Benjamin Franklin Elementary School. Upon retirement in 2004, I worked in the New Haven Public Schools, served under Dr. Reginald Mayo for that 1 year, supervising 6 of his principals and funded through the Stupsky Foundation. And left New Haven and joined the State Department of Ed. They were developing their school improvement division. And I was hired on, along with several of my colleagues, Leon McKinley and James Thompson, as leaders in residence. And as the school improvement unit was evolving to a more supportive and service organization to schools, I was trained to become a leadership coach, and I worked across the state, serving in that capacity. Came to Hartford Public Schools in 2007 and began to work here in Hartford Public Schools as a leadership coach. And certainly it has been a rewarding experience for me. And I was asked, why do you continue? And I say, because I'm not tired of working with individuals to improve the learning capacity of our children, the teaching skill set of our teachers, and the leadership skill set of our administrators. And I'll tell you this story that one of the employees here in Hartford who was working at the early learning, it's a preschool academy, with DECO, the young lady was one of my students when I was principal at Benjamin Franklin School, and she reminded me of that. And I tell you what, I am very happy about that, because what my vision was at that time as principal is to make sure our students were thriving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The relationship with Leo has been quite rewarding. So far, we've had several meetings together, and what we do is we establish a time in the day that we have conversations about his work, and I help him through problem solving and conversations of problem solving and processing what has to get done, how to get it done, and what obstacles would interfere, and how to work through those obstacles. The challenges he is fully aware of, but he has shown me that he is a person who is not easily sidetracked, that he is a focused individual, and he loves those kids. And I see the relationship that he's already established with the children at his school, as well as the faculty and the community at large. So I really am very pleased to be working with Leo, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be his coach.
And I just wanna say, likewise, I met Tom. I was part of Lead Connecticut, one of the 6 or 7 Hartford principals that was chosen for the state initiative. And they said we're gonna have a leadership coach. So I met Tom about a month ago, and just the first conversation that we had, and the questions that he was asking me, he wasn't giving me any answers. So I was appreciative of that, but sometimes you just want that answer, but he was not going to give me the answer. So it's been a very productive relationship so far, and just him being there today at our staff meeting, and we went back and we had about 5-10 minutes of constructive feedback. So I know for a fact there's a couple of things I'll change in my agenda the next time around. But Tom has just been a wealth of knowledge and just a really great support for whatever questions I have, and also just providing a lot of resources and materials. I'm so happy that we're working together, and it really shows the story of us.
So the stories of Leo and Tom provide just 2 concrete examples of how the Office of Talent Management is working to support, grow, and retain our teachers and leaders. Our focus is on differentiating support to our own. What do they need to be where they want to be in their careers? As you can see from Leo's story, he received supports along the way as a new teacher, as a teacher leader, as an aspiring school leader, and now as a new principal. And you can see from Tom's story that while he drifted the time from Hartford, he's come back. He's come back to give back. It took him other places, but since he's returned to the Hartford Public Schools to give back, to share the expertise he's gained throughout his career as a leadership coach to Leo. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want you to ask yourself, now we're getting to the interactive part for you. I want you to ask yourself, as a Board of Education member, what is my connection to the story of Leo, the story of us, and the story of now? I think it's safe to say that the story of Leo and the story of Tom and their collective story of us all connect to the story of now for all of us in the Hartford Public Schools. Our conversation this evening is about how the Hartford Public Schools can best find, support, and keep talent within our schools and in the district as a whole. In terms of finding and retaining talented educators, Hartford, for certain, faces significant challenges that all urban districts face throughout the country. My hope is that our dialogue this evening will underscore our shared identification of what the issues are and help us build a shared vision of where we'd like to go. So here's a question for you. From your perspective, what urgent challenges related to talent do we face as a district? You have in front of you a blue note card, empty. I would like you, please, if you would, to take 2 minutes to think for yourself, what are the urgent issues in your own mind? If you would just take a moment to think about that and write those issues on your note card. is an elimination. I brought a ruler to hit you, but. The board is writing down their thoughts about the question, which is, from your perspective, what urgent challenges related to talent do we face as a district? Thank you. All right, so what I'd like you to do, this is called Think, Pair, Share. What I would like you to do, please, is to turn to the person next to you and have a conversation about your issues that you've raised on your card. So please, it will take 2 minutes, 1 minute per person. Share your thoughts with the person next to you. So I'm thinking you go here.
But I do that at least twice a week.
Related to talent.
So he knows.
So. So have,
So what do we do now?
20 minutes, 20 seconds. Not minutes, I swear. Done. Okay, so we're exploring dialogue here. So I can see by the looks that there are some people who are more sharing than others. Sherry.
I share all the time.
Some of us are more caring.
Literally,
Okay,
twice a week.
I want to say to you that the gentleman behind me with the computer is not surfing the internet. He's taking notes for me, so we will be recording your thoughts. But let's talk. What's on your mind about talent and your concerns regarding talent in the Hartford Public Schools?
Who would like to be heard?
I'll jump in.
Dr. Best.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate having life presented to us, and it's inspiring to hear the stories of Leo and Tom, who I know. Very inspiring to hear about your dedication and commitment to education. With the question, from my perspective, what urgent challenges related to talent do we face as a district? What I've lifted up is that I feel that when it comes to teachers in particular, I think the current model of training and preparing teachers in higher education does not really prepare them for the needs of an urban school district. I think that we're really preparing teachers through an old model of education that does not fully consider the impact of poverty and violence. And so when we think about the urban context, I believe we get these wonderful teachers that went into it for the right reason, and then we put them in the heart of the inner city with all of the issues that happen in the city, and they were not prepared. And so slowly but surely we snuff the life out of them because we do not give them the support that they need, especially when we look at the impact of poverty and violence, which is real. The children see things that many of us cannot even fathom because we come from different backgrounds. I think also one of the challenges to retain talent is that we have been reduced to teaching to the test rather than transforming the lives of children. And there's no room for teachers to be the called ones. I'm a minister, so I know what it is to be called to a profession, and I believe teachers are called. But once again, by teaching to the test, we have snuffed the life out of their creativity. So why would you want to stay in a calling or in a profession that you went into nobly when all you're going to do is shove information down a child's throat so they can pass a test, but you can't really transform their lives, which is why I believe so many people choose to become teachers. I think that the teachers are really put in a very hard place, and I think that's why we lose so many teachers. And then when it comes to inner city education, teachers who have a degree can choose to go someplace else. They don't have to put up with all of this, even though they may be well-meaning, they just don't have to do it. So in the meantime, those that do choose to stay in education and stay in the inner city, you know, we need to do bows and hugs and squeezes and whatever to try to keep them there, because people that make a commitment to work in the inner city are a special breed of teachers, and I think we have to give them all the supports we can because it's a really hard job.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? If you want.
Question again?
The question again, from your perspective, what urgent challenges related to talent do we face in this district?
I mean, what you would be looking for?
What challenges are we facing? What difficulties do we have that we need to address?
Well, I think number one, in terms of a teacher, that you get certified personnel. That if you're looking for a science teacher, you don't pick up a history teacher because he's available and he's willing to do a year of science for you. I think that makes a big difference. Also, you want to get a teacher who is somewhat involved. You don't want the teachers running over the kids before when school is over. Maybe they should stay a little longer and see what they can do. So there are 100 things you can talk about, and some are more important than others, but eventually you have to have the teacher involved with the student. You may talk about Common Core, you can talk about SAT, you can talk about anything you want, but unless the teacher and the student make a combination in which one learns and the other teaches, you might be just spinning your tires.
So expertise and engagement with students.
If that word fits,
right?
yes.
Certification. Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Stallings.
You're going to share it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm not using
I just wanted to piggyback off of a few things. I agree we need to support our teachers more, especially when it comes to discipline in the classroom. We need to find ways to make sure that the teacher is able to complete his or her instruction in that a lot of the time, and not spend more time disciplining or calling security or calling the office. The bilingual instruction or support for teachers, I think is more important, or making sure that the teachers have culturally aligned lesson plans, but at the same time, they're able to, I guess, have or create a relationship with certain subgroups in the community so they can better understand the culture, so that they can deliver a lesson plan more effectively. by utilizing cultural norms and things of that nature. I think that would be fantastic. But other than that, I would say just more technological development. In a perfect world, I wish that you could find a way to monitor social media from the start of school to the end of school. That's a tall order, but other than that, I would say social conditions. Yes, dealing with poverty and the other social destructive issues that are prevalent outside the school, but find their way inside the school and classroom. I think there's ways that if teachers are able to identify certain, what do you want to call those? Not stressors,
Risk factors?
Yeah, I guess risk factors or stressors or key, actions or things that triggers, on a general level. I think that would help conflict resolution, because basically I think, in my opinion, teachers spend a lot of time with conflict resolution, and that's not necessarily what you want teachers to spend their time doing. So just things like that. But I feel that Hartford has the best teachers. So thank you, Ms. Chair.
That's great. So classroom management, cultural competency, understanding where kids are coming from, understanding the influence of technology, and being able to step up.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that our teachers aren't able to manage the classroom. I just think that because there's so many issues that come at them, where, I was a young parent and really didn't understand the pressures of teachers. So, I've caused a lot of stress where I should have been helpful. And I think there's a very serious breakdown in terms of parents and teachers, and where as a parent, I may be under the impression that the teacher has a motive when it's really just a motive to educate, and they're trying to educate me at the same time, and there's a social disconnect. And I think that that if we're talking about losing talent, to me that is a major part of why teachers burnt out. And if I have a lot of times teachers have complaints that go unheard. Seriously, there's not a very clear way for a teacher to articulate without repercussion. This is what I find, that, I have a problem here or I have a problem here. And then the last thing I would say is we are not allowing our teachers more latitude in terms of creating programs and lesson plans and being more academic and being able to evaluate what their practice is and create a model. So, and I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stallings. Anyone else?
I have something.
Dr. Taylor.
So I took a different approach and looked at it from the concept of knowing the data. So for example, if we're talking about weight management, it's a simple equation of calories you take in versus calories you burn. So you got to know if someone's weight is fluctuating, is it because they're taking in too many calories or not burning enough? And you'd assess both sides of the equation. So if we're talking about personnel and staffing, there's two obvious areas that you'd be looking at. Why aren't we recruiting the best teachers? And why aren't we retaining the best teachers? And I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about why we aren't doing either, and we've heard a lot about this, and I think both of these perspectives that we've heard so far, actually all three of them are very good, but they're also anecdotal from our experience of working in the district, the perception, the bias, what we hear about, the problems we hear from individual teachers. But I think systematically we don't actually have a really good grasp on why we're not recruiting certain teachers, why are we having trouble, hiring for certain spots, for example? Why are we having trouble with certain areas, certain demographics, certain schools? And then why are we having trouble retaining other teachers? Why is it that we're losing our most educated and experienced teachers or teachers in certain areas? And I'm not sure, again, even though we know all the anecdotal reasons, that we have actually looked at the data to say, what is the single biggest reason? Is it salary? Is it support? Is it job satisfaction? Is it lack of, administrative support? Is it disorganization? And without knowing those, it's really hard to be strategic.
I'll be speaking to so much of that.
Anyone else?
I'll say a few words.
Kodo?
I think my fellow board members have really come come through with a lot of deep thinking about teaching in a very respectful way. So I really appreciate some of the comments. I think I wanted to add, perhaps, maybe some more stories and think about. I've worked with Hartford teachers in a variety of ways, being a board member, but also in teacher preparation, which Shelley was kind of mentioning earlier. And I think what Beth is saying is important because it's starting to see some patterns. I mean, we do have a good number of very young teachers in some of our schools that are very inexperienced. And in a lot of ways, it seems like Hartford, and I'd love to see the data on this, is kind of the training ground for a lot of the state's teachers that end up sticking around for a number of years and then either leave the profession entirely, some stick it out, but I imagine many of them end up going to other districts as well, where kind of my next point, the working conditions are probably much easier, and I think that's something to think about. When I look at comparing some of our magnet teachers, I see the same faces over and over again every year, and then when I go to the other schools, Moylan and McDonough, and just kind of in my neighborhood, they're different people kind of all the time, and they're kind of rotating for a variety of reasons. So that's something that I've noticed, and it'd be helpful to see some of the data on that. I recall and I'm not saying it's like this anymore, but I mean, I recall my wife maybe 7 or 8 years ago applying to be a beginning teacher. She's left the profession at this point, but she applied to Hartford and West Hartford and Manchester, and Manchester offered her a job as a first-year teacher. West Hartford said you need to have 3 years of teaching before you can even teach here in West Hartford. And then in Hartford, they offered her a job as a bilingual teacher. She wasn't even certified as bilingual, but she knew Spanish. And it was like they were looking for anybody to fill a position, right? And they would kind of, and this was a number of years ago, I don't know if it's like that anymore, but that's kind of one of my impressions about Hartford is it's probably more difficult to keep and find really good people to stick around and keep them. Although we do there are a lot of dedicated folks as well. Kind of my last point, or last 2 points is, this actually, it's kind of a long-term trend, but the declining percentage of teachers of color is something that I've looked at. In our district, we had 2 stories from 2 black educators who made their way through the ranks. And at least the numbers seem to be showing kind of a drop-off, but it's been a kind of a gradual thing over the last 10 years. So that's something that I've noticed. And I wonder how that impacts our staff, our ability to connect with our students. And obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm kind of, I'm using like basic state data, but you have access to better data. And then the last thing is, how are we kind of helping our teachers to grow and be better, kind of our developmental process, our evaluation process. I'm very concerned about the way that we're doing evaluation right now. I've mentioned some of these things about using NWA MAP scores, for instance, to evaluate teachers. It's not supposed to be for that. And if I was a teacher in Hartford being evaluated that way, I wouldn't be a teacher in Hartford for very long. And so I think we have to look at what are other models about doing growth and development and evaluation. I know that's kind of a bigger task maybe at the state level, but I think we have the ability to maybe try out some different models about how to do this. Because back to Shelley's point, we're kind of making a factory model of teaching, in my opinion. And it's not a professional model of teaching, right? Where people grow and they develop and they get better, they get help from peers that know how to teach better than they do, and so on and so forth. And we're making it really about bean counting, So that's what I worry about, kind of in the long term. So, but again, the last point is that there are a lot of dedicated people that work in Hartford. Like, they work hard, they work, I don't know how they continue to do it in many cases, but they do. And so I think it's important not to, the last several years have been about kind of a negative approach to teaching and teachers and saying, it's all your fault. This is why, the thing's falling apart because of you. And I think that's going overboard. Because obviously teachers don't supervise themselves, right? Teachers don't evaluate themselves. Someone evaluates them, right? And someone helps them to grow. It's not on their own. So I just think we need to make it, kind of keep moving in a positive direction, I think is important, to look at those people that are doing well, kind of model that, keep that going. Obviously, when people aren't doing their job, it's important to move them along and say, maybe this isn't the profession for you, or you have to improve, and so on and so forth. But I think that's not the overwhelming experience that I've seen, kind of in my travels. So, that's all. But I appreciate your work too. I mean, I know that you're working hard to make it happen. And I think the state needs to think about what they're asking us to do as well. And I've been very vocal at the state level and saying what you're asking districts to do may not be supported by good practice, good evidence, and that sort of thing. So I think we can take a lead on some of these issues.
I think you hit the nail on every among you.
Yeah.
You've really pointed to the key things that Matt Poland's question always is, what keeps you up at night? Just about everything you've mentioned today it falls on that list. But working conditions and equity in terms of working conditions, absolutely critical for us to look at. And from our exit data that we get from teachers who do leave early, we do understand that that's an issue, and that's an issue that we're addressing. Retention of good people, we do have statistics that we're getting baseline data, and we're feeding that information to principals and portfolio directors by October 1st. So we're looking at where are they leaving, how soon are they leaving, and that's something I'll talk about in a second. Testing is something that's on all of our minds in the evaluation system, and the requirements just to meet the letter of the law, and that's what I mean, are things we wrestle with daily. And you can speak with Andrea Johnson. We talk about this all the time. How can we stop counting beans and start talking about what's going on in classrooms? And the compliance issues have been challenging to meet, but now and we've agreed that in our committee, which involves teachers, administrators, central office, building-based people, we have said we're dedicating this year to talking about good teaching, period. We'll comply, but we have to do that.
Excuse me, I just wanted to put in one more
Please,
thing.
yeah.
That it would haunt me if I didn't say it. An urgent challenge clearly is the issue of cultural competence and diversity as well. We are in Hartford, Connecticut. We know that the student population is made up heavily of children of color, and yet we know that there's a gap as far as the educators that they're seeing every day. And clearly there's a challenge when it comes to having men in the classroom, because we have boys and girls in the classroom, and it does affect the young boys to see primarily women all the time. Because of the cultural competence issue, I think that an urgent challenge we have is, yes, there's behavior issues with a lot of the kids based on what's going on in their lives. I used to work for DCF, so I have a good understanding of the impact of poverty and abuse and neglect on young children, and there's a high population of children that are in that boat. But also, I want to lift up that I believe we have some teachers that don't see the children as human as they need to. There are teachers that see children as, they're disrespecting them as human beings. They're not talking to them in a respectful way, and they're not talking to parents in a respectful way, because they cannot relate to the parents because they are other, and they cannot relate to the children because they are other. So the children and the parents both are objectified by some teachers. So I think that's an urgent issue as well, because some teachers probably should not be in this setting because they're afraid of the children they're teaching. And if you're afraid of the children you're teaching, you're afraid of their parents, we're not going to get the best result out of you. So I think that's something that has to be addressed, because it creates a certain cultural dynamic in the school. The other thing I want to lift up is we received a letter today from a parent who was concerned about security officers being used as class aides. And she wanted to know whether or not this is a phenomenon throughout the school system. I would say it's something to look at, because when there are behavior issues, I don't doubt that some teachers who cannot manage their classroom would call the security guard Mr. So-and-so to intimidate the children. And so it infuses in the child's mind that police are in control, and are we using the police state in the classroom? That's a question as well. And so I think that's something that has to be looked at. How are we using security guards in our schools? Are we starting to police certain behaviors? And then I would look also as an urgent challenge at the high rate of children that might be expelled, pushed out, arrested, pushed in the juvenile justice system, all because of behavioral issues. So on the children's side of things and the cultural side of things, I think those are urgent challenges that does also affect the talent that we're seeing in the school system. So I have to lift that up because it would plague me if I didn't think about the cultural nuances of what we're seeing in the classroom as well.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Dr. Narez?
I just want to say we will absolutely follow up on the security guard issue you raised. If you could forward that letter to me, I'll make sure we follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. A number of us had identified this as an issue and cross departments. So Marta Bentham was with us and talking about this. Someone from curriculum and instruction was with us, assessment, people from my office. And we said, all right, what can we do in addition to providing professional learning for new teachers and ongoing, which we do, but how can we really get to the center of this? And so what we did was worked with an outside consultant to develop questions for the school climate survey, which is filled out by teachers, students, and parents. And they're focused specifically on cultural competency. And so what that will do, now that we'll have those in the survey, it will lift up the issue if it's a particular issue, because it has to be dealt with at the building level. It's part of the culture of the building. It's not something we can just do big umbrella. We have to really focus on what's happening at the school. So that will become part of the school accountability plan if that rises up through the data that comes from all people. So we certainly see that as an issue.
And that also reminds me of one last thing, and I'll stop. I think that we have to acknowledge there is a challenge when it comes to talent, when you have teachers that have been in the system a long time and the union protects them. Mm-hmm. And some of them are teachers that we all know, because I used to work in the union environment of social workers. Some who have been well rooted in the system, you can't get rid of them. And they shouldn't be there anymore. And so I think the union has to take a look at itself, and instead of always protecting someone just because they protect them, think about what's in the best interest of the children. If a person cannot function well, let's not just hide it and fight it so we win. Let's look at what's in the best interest of the children, because that affects who stays too. Some people should not stay. It's not just the teachers. Some administrators should not stay. They have been gone a long time. Everybody knows it. They need to be moved. So we've got to start policing ourselves and cleaning house and getting rid of dead wood. It's not personal, but if you can't function, you shouldn't still get a paycheck, because in the rest of the world, you lose your job. That's my last thing.
Well, could I just say it's those difficult conversations that have to take place, and there has to be a level of trust that we're in it all for the same reason, and I would say too that we're working on that. We're working on that. So I'm going to take you quickly through the next slides, because I think we just so much bubbled up that I'd like to address your questions more than talk at you. So I'm going to do the Cliff's Notes version of the rest of this presentation. So we look at ourselves as the Office of Talent Management and as the district as a whole, as Dr. Narvaez has said, as a learning organization. We need to be learning ourselves about our clients, about our people, about our talent, and we also need to help our talent grow and provide learning opportunities for our people. So we do that through levels of support that we try to provide from our office to our principals, and therefore to teachers. And we are really trying to focus on how we can sustain the work that's done, how we can keep the people here. And I have to say, if I have a mission, that's my big challenge for me personally. Why are they leaving? Who are they? What are their stories? What can we be doing to help principals be as supportive as possible to keep the talent? You talk about the issue of recruitment and retention. I have been studying this. I changed my dissertation topic because this was bothering me so much. And so I've been doing a lot of research on this particular topic, and I don't think it's so much in the recruitment, it's in the retention. We get good people, and then we lose good people. In 5 years, And we are not different from other urban environments. In 5 years, 60% of our new teachers are gone within the first 5 years. And that is consistent with the literature. 50% across all schools, higher than 50% in urban districts. So I think that that's where our work needs to be. I've been spending time in exit interviews with people who are leaving and people who are successful in staying to try to compare their experiences. And I'm going to be more than happy to be able to report that out as soon as I finish the work I'm doing on my dissertation. So what do we do to try to be a learning organization, to try to help teachers and administrators, and I want to stress something about this, but have the career pathways that will make them want to stay doing what they're doing. We highlighted an administrator here, 2 administrators here, but I want to be very clear that we have the utmost respect for and need to support teachers who want to be here as teachers. Teachers who want to be teachers are the people we want to serve. So I just want, because I gave you one example here of these 2 people, I don't want you to think that we're any less invested in keeping our teachers in the classroom. At the end of this presentation, you'll see a diagram that talks about the life of a teacher and what the teacher, how that teacher interacts with our department. We offer many onboarding opportunities, teacher induction opportunities that we're trying to grow even further, and professional growth aligned with what people's needs are. So teachers and administrators, I just wanted to be sure to take that. So in the professional learning, we offer programs. You heard about the resident principal program, the aspiring leader program. We have teachers in residence who go back to teaching after 2 years, after serving in a leadership capacity. And then we also have models. We have coaching models where we support people in the classroom. We support people who are doing the observing in classrooms. And so we have central office and other folks supporting that. So the story of now, remember? The story of now. So what's hot on our list right now? And I want you to know that we're going to take what you've said to us and incorporate that in the story of now. So we want to retain principals and teachers. That's a major area of focus for us. We want to strengthen our teacher induction program. We want to help with the Connecticut Common Core. What do we need to do to support in terms of the level of instruction? And we also want to do what we said about the teacher evaluation program. We want to bring it back to the classroom and not the calculator. And then in terms of differentiating support to high-need schools, we recognize that to help the conditions so that there's equity among schools, that we have to step up our game, or continue to step up. I wouldn't say we haven't, but continue to step up our game. In terms of recruitment, what we've done this year is we got our newest recruits to the neediest schools first so that they could be involved in earlier hiring. So that was one thing we did in terms of staffing. We have our staffing people in the buildings, and what we want to do is align them with the portfolio directors so that they are on the team to make sure the schools are staffed and supported in the appropriate way. Professional learning, I've talked about, and performance management, that's the teacher evaluation. These are all priorities for us right now, and they do underscore, really in large part, what you've said. How do we know, and this goes to Dr. Taylor's point, how do we know if we got there if we don't know where there is? So we need to have more metrics. And so this year, we are dedicated to looking at metrics and helping principals and portfolio directors look at their data. So by October 1st, our commitment is that we're going to give each building leadership team and portfolio director attrition data. How many teachers have you lost over the past year and what subjects? Tenure status. Where are your teachers in terms of tenure? What should you be thinking about in terms of support and when they do receive tenure? Attendance information, teacher attendance, it's a very important piece. We're going to have that all in a packet for them. And then the summary of teacher evaluation data. Where are your teachers? We can now in real time look at what areas would be more helpful in terms of professional learning. We want to give all of that data to our principals so that they are effective in evaluating where their staff is. Now, in terms of our work, the data that we expect to have, we know we will have, which we have now. Retention data for this past year, we know where the teachers have gone. The other interesting piece that we really is significant is that we have the dates that we received their resignations. I need to tell you that we'll be working with the union to talk about how we can incentivize people who have decided that they're leaving to let us know sooner so that we're not making last-minute hires, because last-minute hires are not the good hires. No offense to anyone who's hired last. I mean, I'm just saying that the more deliberate, more deliberate the hiring, and the more purposeful the hiring, the better for everybody, including the retention data shows, the research shows that for those people who are hired late, they're the most likely to leave. So that'll be, we are also looking at hiring timelines. When did the opening occur? How long did it take us to fill it? We'll use that metric. Diversity of administrators and teachers, I'd like to speak to that a bit. There is no question, particularly with certification requirements that we have in the state, that the pool of minority candidates is not as large as it should be, and that's a conversation to happen at the state level in terms of certification and also with higher education. Because the numbers, that the national statistic, the latest national statistic for teachers, minority teachers, is 17.3% minority teachers. Hartford's number is 24.1. So it's reasonable, but it's not good enough. But we have to look at root cause that may be beyond us, and that we have to lift our heads and try to have a larger conversation about that. In terms of principals, the national average is 17.6% minority principals. The principals in Hartford this year, 49% are minority. In terms of overall administrators, 17.6, we're at 38%. So I want you to know that we use this metric, we keep this close, and we know where we stand and what we have. We do have work to do. Teacher evaluation feedback. I think, Mr. Cotto, your points are on the money in terms of where the pendulum has swung, and I think that we've made a commitment on our committee, our Identifying Instructional Excellence Committee, to focus this year not on the compliance, of course we'll be compliant, but on the conversations about what's going on in classrooms. And then finally, we're going to align our professional learning opportunities with what we see from classroom observations, not numbers, but where are we seeing the areas where teachers could use further support. So those are the measurements that we're holding ourselves to as we look at how we're doing and where we need to go. So I close with one last question, and then we'll have some questions and comments. I'm kind of getting this feeling that think, pair, share probably isn't where we want to go right now, but so I'm just going to ask you to think and then talk, all right? So what specific actions can we take together as a board and a school system to do something about what we've talked about tonight? What specific actions would you like to see taken?
Well, I think from a beginning to standpoint and to follow up, now that I know you're collecting all these great data, it would be great, and I think the first necessary step before we can even think about actions to actually see the data.
Okay.
And I think if we do that, again, we've talked about this on a board level for multiple things, strategic action, not seeing things as action items on an agenda where we're just putting money at certain projects to fund them on a year-by-year basis, and I know Mr. Cotto has spoken to this very eloquently, but to see how all of this fits into a strategic plan, especially with hiring, recruiting, supporting, sustaining teachers, guides us in making decisions. So to me, the logical first step would really starting to see all of these data and these ideas that you've presented.
Anyone else? Mr. Cotto.
Thank you. Just a couple of things that, on top of my head. I think the need for, people talk about like training and professional development, but oftentimes it's not very productive. And sometimes it can range from very practical sort of nuts and bolts things, classroom management, to like, I've had, you know, when I worked for CREC, we had a professional development where they were trying to sell us a book series. And how, you know, how helpful was that, you know, in the big scheme of things? And everyone hated it, and then we rejected it, and then we moved on. But it was a wasted moment, and now we don't like professional development as much anymore, right? That much less, even though it was pretty low on the scale of things that we like. But like, what sort of things do we need to have? Like, I'll give you an example. There were teachers from Burns and administrators that went over to CREC to have a training on how to make a welcoming school, right? And that somewhat gets to what Shelley's talking about respecting, talking to students and parents and being respectful to them. But why are we going to CREC? If we must have somebody in the school district that can speak to other teachers and administrators about how to make a welcoming school. And then same with classroom management, same with other nuts and bolts things, same assessment, checking in on how kids are doing in class. So I guess all that said to say is, you know, what can we be doing ourselves to help ourselves out? That's kind of what, you know, I don't know, maybe we already do this, so I'm just being like, you know, maybe I just don't know about
It's
that.
a combination. CREC does have a grant to provide us, everyone, but with blended solutions, cultural competency. So we're taking advantage of a resource that has been grant funded. So that's really what that connection is about. And it is helpful information for our teachers. But you're right. I mean, we have internal expertise, and we need to build on that as well, which I think we do. So.
Because there's stuff that, like Shelley was saying, that the universities, I don't think it's no malice on their part, but there's things that they're not necessarily providing, particularly the pre-service, in-service teachers that are going into schools like ours. Just to give you an example, like, you know, I taught a course or two at Central, and we had some beginning teachers, and they had really no experience in a lot of things because they're young, right? They're just young people, right? But on the other thing, they didn't really know how to interact with parents all that well. And so we talked a lot about, you know, do you treat parents as a threat to your power in the classroom, or do you treat parents as, do you try to like, you know, do you kind of like push them away or kind of pull them in too much, and are you working with them as partners? And there was a lot of kind of frank conversations, and I mean, frankly, there's a huge divide, you know that, between a lot of our teachers and our students, and so they have no idea many times where our kids are coming from and where they're, you know, what they're all about. So there's gaps that the university isn't providing. So,
right.
You know, what can we do there? I'm just throwing it out there.
No,
and the
absolutely.
last thing, and then, you know, just to think about it is, what is the goal? What are our goals? Like, so I'm not entirely too much into like numeric goals, but what are our goals? Are our goals just simply to have better retention? Are they to? I guess I just want to know, what are the goals?
The big picture goal?
Like, yeah, what's like the big picture
goal is
like,
to have an effective and supported principal in every school, and an effective and supported teacher in front of every student.
Okay.
So that's the big goal.
Okay. I think that's important. Then we build from there and talk about, you know, how do we get there from there? Because that's something that I thought was kind of missing from, you know, like you said, a lot of like compliance. Like, this is what the state is asking us to do, right? But what's the goal? What do we want to have here? I think is just something to answer. And then my last point would be as what can we do as a board? I think my question to you is, do you think that we can talk to the state? The state has allowed some districts to kind of create their own evaluation rubrics and that sort of thing. To what extent do you think we can design our own evaluation system, maybe pilot one? I know in Madison, Connecticut, for instance, they're doing peer evaluation. It's like peer assessment and review sort of model. So to what extent do you think that we can kind of, you know, ask the state or push the state to consider alternatives that may be better?
I think that's the next big question, and that's what we have to test. And we also, as a evaluation committee, the multidisciplinary committee, have said that we are going to look at peer assistance and review. And I know that Dr. Narvaez has had extensive experience with it in Montgomery County. So that's a big piece of where we're looking ourselves. I think those are all valid questions, important questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Dr. Best.
As I consider the whole organization, I get the sense that because we have spent so much time as the bean counters, we've lost something along the way. I focus a lot on the teachers because they are the individuals that are right before the child. The rest of the system is supposed to be supporting them, but I think something's happened along the way where we've ended up in the midst of an organization where there is a lot of fear and stress. And the teacher is fearful, and I think the administrators are fearful, and that creates a system that does not easily support children. Imagine being in a house that's on fire and trying to feel calm. And I suspect many of the teachers feel extreme pressure. Many of the administrators feel the same way. That cannot be wholesome for children that have their own stressors when they go back home. So I think the organization needs to look at a paradigm shift to change the entire culture. So I have a background in community organizing, and if you're going to shift the culture of an organization, you have to first get a sense of what that organization is at the time. Data gives you some information, but very often the data comes in a very short factor. It doesn't give you the full story, it gives you little percentage points of certain things. So one of the first things would be to hear from the teachers in a focus group kind of manner, so you're getting qualitative data and not just quantitative data. And I think that we have to do that sort of thing if we can get the information from the teachers and they would feel that they would not be at risk for telling the truth. If we're going to change the culture, we have to give people the opportunity to tell the truth of where they really are and what's going on. Also, I think part of the lesson that we can learn from the magnet schools is their whole notion of customer service, because they have shifted their context from what we might operate in as a bureaucracy to sort of a capitalistic customer-friendly model. So they have to do some different things that a bureaucracy can't do if they're going to survive. So if we're going to shift the culture, we have to look at what we can learn in the marketplace of education with some of the best and brightest, more successful organizations that are operating outside the paradigm of our bureaucracy, so we could change the culture of our organization. And finally, I think there could be something powerful that could come from having our own sort of urban education institute. If they're not teaching it in college, then we've got to teach it ourselves, and who knows it better than us? Yeah. We've got some people that have been in this environment for a long time and have wisdom that has probably never been shared. So it's not so much that we have to go out and get the answers. We have wise people that are probably sitting in little quiet places that never get asked. And we might benefit from seeking the wisdom of people like a Thomas Faniel, who's been around quite a while and, you know some things. Not to take away from that age statement or anything like that, but he knows some things, and we have to share that kind of wisdom, I think.
You know, we're doing that we have a cohort from UConn that's problem-based in Hartford for administrative certification, and I think you're right, the next step is to do that for teachers, and they're doing that in Boston. So I think we're working with an urban human capital consortium, and we're going to be talking to them about that. I think your point is well taken. And the other thing I wanted to point out was that qualitative data that you're talking about, I think is really going to come out through this transition team work, because there are many focus groups that have met, and I think we're going to be able to pinpoint exactly what you're talking about with the fear and the culture issues that need to be addressed. So I'm hopeful that we'll have that, and we'll have those data soon. Well,
Mr. Stallings?
Mr. Chair, thank you. First, I just want to say I really didn't realize how difficult your job was, so appreciate all the work you do, because I didn't think it was that stressful.
You made my night.
And with that said, just talking about culture for a minute, I'm not an educator, and as a parent and a community activist, I can only tell you what's wrong with the system. And that's part of the culture that should change. How do we educate the community at large about what the responsibility and the roles are of teachers and administrators and what the direction of the school system is. I get a lot of people, I'm approached at least 10 times a day on how can I get a job in the school system? How can I work in the school system? And for me, I think the best thing would be, how do we educate our would-be teachers and would-be employees on how to get in the system? What do we need? What qualifications do I need? What courses do I need to take? Or what other development do I need to add to my resume in order to qualify for a job in the system? And last thing I would say is just there's a shared responsibility here in the sense that, you know, we can talk about teachers and discipline and teachers and complaints, but I spend a lot of time in the community, and I don't know what's going on with these, you know, with the children and what's going on, the changes. So to a large part, I would say there's a cultural shift, and I talk about subcultures a lot. And with these shifts and breakdowns in relationships and some of the other things that plague our community, it always plays out in the school. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think one of the major problems that teachers face is they're trying to do their job and to try to understand the nuances of this subculture and that subculture and how we communicate or how we don't communicate is, again, a large chunk of the problem. And to me, it's social. And what can a teacher do? I mean, there's some things that you just can't help. And I think that a lot of our teachers are drowning in that because it's not necessarily, I've met some teachers that don't know how to talk to families and things like that, so I know that exists, but I realize that if I have a negative attitude and I continuously disrespect you, eventually you're gonna get tired of that. And if you have 20 parents coming at you 20 different ways and you don't know how to stop that barrage, it becomes stressful. So I just think in the sense that if we look at the community also and the level of understanding on how we are supposed to be a partner with a teacher and how we're supposed to partner with the school and be a resource instead of an adversarial component, I think that would help a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Anyone else? Anything else?
I have one last thing.
All right, Dr. Bell.
It's hard when you get a preacher and you give him an open mic.
Yes.
One of the things we're talking about is what we can do together, and I'm not sure how we present our core values of the organization, but I think it comes back to really agreeing on core values and starting to live into them. That's part of how you shift the culture. And so it may be corny, but the idea of people being in a system where they have passion and joy and hope and a spirit of cooperation and maybe even love, I think we might have an organization that has possibility. And so part of it is looking at core values again and starting to live them instead of having them just pasted on a wall someplace and nobody tries to live into it. Because what we're really talking about is a whole bunch of people doing the best they can with their own issues and trying to show up at work. And I think everybody's trying based on who they are, but we've got to work with that.
One last thing.
Stallings.
It would be helpful to me if, and I don't want to say talking points because I don't want to minimize what you're trying to do, but if I had talking points on how or what you're doing so that I can advocate on your behalf in the community or on behalf of the district, that would be very helpful for me.
In the context of people who want to be, I'm going back to your earlier comment, people who want to be part of the system and understand how the system works, is that for
Well,
those?
both.
Mm-hmm.
That and what you and Mr. Coulter was discussing.
Okay.
What is the goal?
Yep.
What are our objective?
One
and how-
pager.
Pardon?
You want a one-pager?
Sure. But more importantly, how we can buy into that as
Yeah.
a community and support the mission.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
All right.
Anything else? Nothing else? Thank you very much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Allen.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very
yeah.
much.
That's very good.
May I just add one quick comment? I just want to thank the board for taking a risk and for trying this new format, and for Jennifer and for Leo and for Tom for being pioneers and also taking a risk in the new format and with the board. We'll talk about it at the retreat, and I'll get your feedback, and we'll keep adjusting. But thank you for being willing to try something new, and you see why I love working with this board. They're so thoughtful and have so much expertise. So I'm so glad it was a conversation, and thank you everybody for being willing to try something new today.
I very much appreciate all your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dorfman, there was not a quorum here when we started. Could you take attendance again?
Richard Waring,
Here.
Evelyn Rivas, Beth Taylor,
Here.
Rex Tony,
Here.
Mayor Pedro Segarra, Shelby Best,
Here.
Michael Brasha,
Here.
Robert Luther Jr.,
Here.
Matthew Coleman. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have to make the motion before we go into executive session. Item 3.1, teacher termination, that the Hartford Board of Education adopts the findings and recommendations of the impartial hearing panel and terminates the employment of Ms. Kay Giannini effective immediately. Is there a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. This time the chair would move to go into executive session to discuss this. Excuse me, sir?
I'm Attorney James Ferguson. I represent this case.
Yes.
And she resigned last Friday. There was nothing to terminate. She has no contract anymore. She filed a written, stamped letter of resignation last Friday. As far as I know, there's no such thing as voluntary servitude in the United States since the 13th Amendment. She's no longer employed by you. If you were to terminate her after she would resign, that would cause legal issues. But in addition, if you terminate her, she would then have the right to appeal, which would not only cause legal issues, but could cause more monetary deficits to the board to defend the appeal, or the appeal to the appellate court from an appeal that she was not successful. I just felt that you should know that before taking an action which is not necessary based upon the written filed letter of resignation which was received by you this morning.
Well, we'll take it up with our attorney. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to go into executive session? There is a motion. It's been seconded. We voted to go into executive session, did we? Okay.
No.
No?
We didn't get to the vote.
We did?
We did.
Okay.
I
we didn't.
moved. Taylor seconded.
It hasn't
But we
been.
didn't vote.
Okay. All in favor of going into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any against? For an executive session, we'll take Dr. Narvez, Ms. Cutler-Hodgman. Anyone else? There we go.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.
You ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to come back out of executive session?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any debate? Hearing none, the chair calls the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any against? We're out of executive session.
Abstain.
Mr. Cotto abstains on the motion to come out of executive session. It still carries by more than the 2/3 margin. With respect to the item of business, teacher termination, that the Hartford Board of Education adopts the findings and recommendations of the impartial hearing panel and terminates the employment of Ms. Kay Giannini effective immediately. Is there any debate on this resolution? Hearing no debate, the chair will call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye?
Aye.
Are there any against? Are there any abstentions?
Abstain.
2 abstentions. Mr. Cotto and Mr. Brescia, the motion carries. Being no further business, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against? None. Motion carries. Adjourned.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.